Hey everybody, welcome back to Submarine History. And today we're going to take a break from submarines, and I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about my amateur radio experience. This week marks 1 year since I got my FCC amateur radio license, and I thought you might be interested to know how that went, and why I did it, and where I'm going with it. So I've got 5 questions that I wrote out and that I'm going to ask myself. And, hopefully you're going to get something from it. And as usual, if you got comments, put them below. And even though I never ask you to like, subscribe, or share, I don't know, I guess I'll do it this time. All right. So like, subscribe, and share, please. Okay. All right. So let's get into these questions. Question number 1, what is amateur radio? Okay. So Marconi, after he patents radio, like back in 1896, it's not long after that amateurs get access to the information. They start building their own spark gap generators, which is what the first radios were. And that's what actually Marconi actually patented originally. And it's not long after that governments around the world, they kind of get together and they decided that, if radio is going to be this commercially successful thing that we think it's going to be, it's only going to be successful if we can kind of separate out all these amateurs who are, on the air, just like stinking up the waves, and, businesses can't do what they need to do and stuff. So these world governments got together and they decided on portions of the radio spectrum that would be available for amateur use. And each country sets up its own like licensing system to kind of control that activity. It's thought that like 2 million people worldwide have amateur radio licenses and participate in the activity. And I call it an activity. For some people, it's going to be a hobby. For other people, it's about public service. For other people, it's about preparedness. And then, for some people, it's going to be a combination of those things. But I was trying to, here in the United States, you have between 800,000 and 1 million people who participate in amateur radio. And we have our population is 340 million. So that is, like 0.25%. So it's a pretty small, it's a pretty small group of people that do this. But I tell you what, I was kind of interested to see where amateur radio is as far as like, a middle-aged white guy, nerd hobby. So I did a little digging. And I found out in the United States that, you have got like 500,000 people who are active model railroad enthusiasts, and you have about 100,000 people who are active astronomy enthusiasts. So that's kind of where amateur radio lies. So, 1 million people doing it, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not once you actually get into it. And we'll talk about that. So question number 2, what is the point of amateur radio? That's a good question. And when I'm having a conversation and it comes up that I have an amateur radio license, that's like the first thing a person will do is they'll pull out their mobile phone and they'll say like, I got my communication device right here. Why would I mess around with radios? Well, there's a couple reasons you would. Okay. And we'll go through them real quick. First of all, it's experimentation with technology. Some people just enjoy that. It's a different way of talking to people around the world. There's a community service aspect to amateur radio. And there's also a military and civilian preparedness aspect to amateur radio. You've got a couple demographics who are in amateur radio. You've got the boomers, okay, who've been doing this since like the early 1960s. All right. And then you have, in addition to the boomers, you have the preppers. And these are younger guys who are coming into amateur radio. And then kind of in between that, you've got a mishmash of people who are doing amateur radio. And, maybe they've got a couple different reasons for it. But it kind of seems like the community today is being driven more by the preppers. At least that's been my experience. And, that doesn't necessarily surprise me. And what I would say, I'd look at the civilian marksmanship program in the United States, the CMP, which started as a federal program, but it goes back to before World War One. And the civilian marksmanship program in the United States, it was a way to get competitive shooting into the hands of the average American for the purpose of them being able to acquire and maintain skill with rifles for the purpose someday of future military, call-ups. And, I would say you can do that with amateur radio too. And in fact, during World War II, the U.S. government, they did a lot of targeted recruiting to amateur radio operators. So, yeah. All right. So why did I get into amateur radio? Okay. So I got into amateur radio. I had actually had an interest in radio for a long time. I never got a license because for the longest time you had to be able to do Morse code for the tests, and I didn't know Morse code. So I thought, how, okay, that's going to be kind of a dead end, right? So then what happened is when I was a civil engineer corps officer in the U.S. Navy, we had a field exercise. This was in February of 2000. No, February 2002. This is just like September, October, November. So this is like 6 months after 9/11. And I'm out at Camp Lejeune doing like a 3-week field exercise with the Naval Construction Battalion, Seabees. And because I was a guy who knew something about computers, I was designated the communications officer for the field exercise, which was interesting, because not only did I have to manage the people, but I also had to understand and be able to implement the communications plan. But I really liked it, and we used a mixture of VHF, UHF radios, and we were even doing digital HF. I specifically remember we had an AN PRC 104, and with that radio we were just doing some very rudimentary packet work, messaging back and forth with other units that were on the exercise and stuff. So that really made an impression on me. Unfortunately, it was kind of like the last time I had a chance to do anything with radios while I was in the Navy. And then when I went into the Army, and then when I transferred over to the National Guard, at the company level, when we would be doing exercises and stuff, we had a communications team. And being a construction engineering technician, when we're out doing military stuff, I'm basically just sitting in the CP doing nothing, drinking coffee. So that gave me a lot of time to actually talk to the radio operators and stuff. And I would watch them setting up their antennas, and I'd watch them working and stuff. And that kind of got my interest going again. And then when I retired in 2019, I was kind of finally in a position to maybe look at maybe doing something with radio, because I had retired, and I did enjoy the camaraderie, and I did enjoy actually being in uniform and fulfilling that public service thing. So how I actually got the license, I was researching something for the channel, and I can't remember what it was. It's possible that I may have been looking information up on Huff Duff, and whatever it was, I was on a web page, and in the corner of the web page there was an ad for take a ham radio test and get your license. So I clicked it, and I was like, okay, I'll try this. Let's see, how bad could I possibly do on this? And I ended up doing a 35 question technician's test exam, and I actually scored a 65%. I think you need 74% to pass. So without studying radio, without really knowing anything about radio, just the fact that I'm an engineer, and through the course of my professional work and stuff, I've had enough interaction with radio and stuff that I kind of knew some things. I ended up just taking a test prep course, and was able to actually pass and get my technician license. So that kind of, so that's how I ended up getting the license. And as soon as I got the license, I started to ask myself that question. It's like, what am I going to do with this? Because the reason for getting the license was basically I wanted to get enough background in radio that, I could discuss some technical topics on the channel. Like I could not have done that episode on Huff Stuff had I not gone through that licensing program and having spent a year doing amateur radio. There's no way I could have written that. So that's been something really good. Other than having the license and working with radios just so I can have some competency and that helps me talk about technical things on the channel. I was still looking for a way, okay, what can I do with amateur radio that's actually useful? Because I did not see myself like sitting in a basement with like a radio stack and like all hours of the night, just like contacting people around the world. I was just like, who would do that anyways? So instead, I thought, okay, how can I get back in touch, doing something military? So originally, the idea was that I was going to get involved with MARS, which is the Military Auxiliary Radio Service. And those are groups of amateurs who operate on DoD-controlled ranges of frequencies, doing encrypted and unencrypted analog and digital radio comms. And that'll be a whole other story like just that. But the long and the short of it is that I bought like the equipment I needed so I could get involved in that activity, only to find out that my yard just was not suitable to have the right kind of antenna, that I could be someone who could do that activity consistently, reliably, and in a way that would be, productive. So I realized, okay, I can't do that, but what else could I do? So what I ended up doing is I got involved with my county's amateur radio emergency service, ARES, ARES. And that's been really enjoyable. That's something I can take a radio and I can be out, say like for, a 5K run. I can be at a station with a radio. I can be calling in for support if someone is experiencing, an emergency, or for like bike races and for like bike endurance rides. I'm part of a team that is out there sweeping, providing assistance to riders, giving them lifts, repairs. And, we're doing all that through radio. And, I'll tell you, my county here where I live in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, they have a really professional organization for ARES. And I am just really impressed with the level of professionalism in how they operate and the organization and the planning that they do for events. And to me, that's been rewarding itself. Even setting aside all that other stuff I said just about, it's giving me the background so I can talk about technical things related to radio in World War II. So what do I like and what do I dislike about amateur radio? I tell you, I really like the people. People in amateur radio, they're super nice. They're pretty smart people. They're really interested and they're really passionate about radio. And there's so few people out there who are licensed. It's very likely if you're just traveling around the country and you just bump into someone and it comes up that you both have amateur radio license, you guys are going to be able to be there for a while, just talking shop a little bit. And that's kind of a neat thing. I think there's a little bit of a mystique to amateur radio too, that, because it's out of reach for a lot of people because, the licensing and everything. So maybe there's like this mysterious aspect that some people are going to perceive. Things that I don't like about amateur radio. And let me go back. I'm gonna tell you some of the other things I like about amateur radio. That I will admit that feeling when you're on the radio and you're scanning the spectrum and you're just listening and you're listening for a signal. You're listening to a voice. And you're able to capture one and you zero in on it and you spend that time listening to that conversation, or you're listening to that person and you're writing information down. It's like your own little Y station from World War II, eavesdropping in on alien signals trying to learn as much as you can about them, and then and then that information goes to higher headquarters for them to act on. That's kind of the approach I take. I'm trying to get as much I'm listening, I'm eavesdropping, and I'm just trying to get as much information as I can. But when you make a contact with somebody over the ocean in another country, that is kind of a special feeling. It really is. It is kind of amazing that I'm keying this mic and this invisible wave is just bouncing around the atmosphere, and it hits this guy's antenna, and we're having a conversation. That is actually kind of remarkable. So that's something, so that's something I like about amateur radio too. And on that note, I'll be honest, like the first time I heard a German language conversation, when I tuned into something, it kind of freaked me out, in that moment. Again, like I said, it's like you think like you're back in World War II, and you're like listening to this, like German officers or something in the field, and it's like you feel like you need to write down what they're saying and stuff. Of course, if you speak German. So that's kind of a cool, interesting thing. Things that I don't like about amateur radio. Probably the biggest thing I don't like is that when people are operating their radio, they say their call sign too fast and they're not clear. And, I spend a lot of time. If I'm listening, if I'm on the radio and I hear somebody, I am only going to try to contact them if I've got a really strong signal. And then, two, if I can get their call sign up front, because I don't want to be that guy who tries to make a contact and then you spend 5 minutes saying, what are the last 2 digits of your call sign? Is it this or is it that, and then it's just wasting everybody's time. So if there was one thing I could tell everybody in amateur radio, just slow down when you say your call sign and use the correct NATO phonetic alphabet, because there really are no rules with amateur radio other than you can't use encryption, you can't use codes, and you can't use it for business purposes. If you want to do encryption, then you can do that, but you have to do that. That's a different kind of license, and that's a different part of the radio spectrum. It's not amateur radio. So, okay, let's see here. So that's already 4 questions. So the last question: should you get into amateur radio? I don't know. If you're interested in technology, if you like computers, if you like communications, you would probably enjoy amateur radio. I think if you enjoy history, you would enjoy amateur radio. I operate on a very basic level. I do all my VHF and HF work. It's all analog. I'm doing it with basic radios. I don't have like these massive amplifiers, that are conditioning signals, for like a big, $20,000 transceiver that I have, in a basement. I'm using analog portable equipment, trying to keep it as real to World War II as possible. Like, I just want to pick up my antenna bag. I want to grab my radio. I want to go out to the field, and I want to string up an antenna, do some transmissions, break it all down, and bug out, just like you would if you were a communications squad, in an army unit in World War II. So that's kind of like what I like to get out of it. Like I said, people do amateur radio everybody's got different motivations. I think it's enjoyable. I think it's a great way to kill a little bit of time on a daily basis. And it's something that if you don't feel like touching the radio for a couple months, that's fine. It can just sit there, and then when you're ready, power it on, and boom, you're back on the air. So that's something really neat. Now, I think most people would say, well, I don't think I can pass the test. And, I've got friends at work who are interested in radio, and some of them are, prepping and stuff like that. And, they want that in their, survival toolkit. But, everybody gets hung up about, being able to pass the test. Right now in the United States, there's three levels of licensing. There's technician, which covers VHF and UHF, and a little bit of the HF spectrum. But then your general license that gets you access to like almost the entire amateur HF spectrum. And then there's a license above general called the amateur extra, and then that kind of builds on the space that you get to operate from the general license. But that's a harder test, and I get enough. I just have everything I need to do. I can do with the general license, so I'm fine with it. But if you don't think you can pass the test, don't worry about it. What you'll do is you'll sign up for like an online test prep course, and you'll just work. It's a known pool of questions that they rotate in for the tests and stuff. So you'll just drill and do practice tests until you can actually pass the test, and do that with the technician. And then spend some time messing around with VH. You can get involved with ARES if you feel like doing community service, or you can just have an HT, and it's just something that you have, and maybe you just listen to, Marine VHF, or maybe you just listen in on a local repeater, and that's all that it ever is. But basically, you get kids 12 years old who can pass the technician's test. So I'm certain that anybody watching this video would be able to do it too. And then once you get your technician, you can mess around with it, see if you like it. It's not very expensive. And then maybe down the road you get the general, and then you can really throw yourself into HF. So, but that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. And the next briefing, we'll be back talking about submarines. But you can look. I'll be doing some more radio content. I'll be mixing it in with the submarine stuff. Some of the radio content will be related to World War II and submarines. Some of it won't. But I enjoyed enough that I want to put a little bit of this stuff on the channel, if for no other reason than it actually allows me to take a little time off from always researching submarines and stuff, because it's a lot of work. So, but thanks for listening in, and everybody, peace out.